Hi and welcome back. In this section we're looking at errors in Python. Python has got a long history with errors, and errors are really useful. And especially the way they're used in Python, as we're going to see throughout this section, makes errors powerful and they make your code very readable. So in this section, we're going to look at errors, how you can use them, how you can create them, how you can deal with them. At the start, nobody likes errors. Let's say we've got something like this line here. Print my variable. Now notice how I've not created my variable before, and this editor already shows me a small cross sign there that it's undefined variable, my variable. But let's say we didn't have that hint there. Python hasn't ran yet, so this code is perfectly reasonable in terms of its syntax. We're printing some variable that Python doesn't know whether it exists or not until the point that it runs. So what will happen when we run this? What type of error will we get? Well, we will get a name error. As you can see up here, we get a traceback. We're going to look at exactly what those are. And then it tells us in file Python in line 1. And at the end it says a name error, and then it gives you a small description of the error. The name my variable is not defined. It's great to receive this error, as opposed to some other error, because once you know what it means, you can easily find the source of the problem. You can say, okay, my variable is not defined, so I must have used my variable somewhere, and it wasn't defined when I used it, and it tells you where that problem was, which is line 1, so all you have to do is go to line 1, find my variable and say, okay, why does it not exist at this point? And of course the reason is because we've not defined it above, and we can do that, equals 1, 2, 3, and then we can rerun this, and now this all works. It would be much worse if instead of a name error with a nice description, you just got an arbitrary, error. I'm running this to get the error again, and notice how it tells you where it is, and the name of the error and a description. If you didn't get any of this, it would be hours. It would take you hours or possibly days to find a simple error like this one in a large application. Remember, large applications, commercial applications, have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of lines of code. So if you got something that said, error, an error has occurred, and that's all the info it gave you, you would struggle. So the name of the error, name error, is really useful, but even more useful is the traceback. This is also called a stack trace in many languages. Traceback is stack trace, more or less the same thing. And what it tells you is where the error happened. And because we're running this file directly, it says it happened in this file. Now, this editor is an online editor, so we don't actually have a file, but it seems that the file is called Python or something like that. It tells you where it happened and so forth. So this traceback is a pretty simple traceback that has one line, and then it tells you where your error happened. Let's look at a slightly more complex traceback, which has more than a single line, and I'll explain what's happening in a larger traceback. It's really important for you to be able to read these tracebacks to understand what they mean so that you can solve your own errors. Here we've got a slightly more complex traceback. This time the traceback has 4 different lines. Now, it's really important that at the very bottom of the traceback, you're still getting the same thing that you got in the previous traceback. You've got the name, which is, in this case, it's a type error. And then you've got a small description, and it says list indices must be integers or slices, not string. And then as you go up, it gives you information of where the error happened. Now, we're going to talk about this stack trace right now. So let's give you a quick description on what is going on. So at the very bottom, it gives you the error that was raised and a description as we've just seen. In this case, it's a type error. Then it gives you what line of your code raised the errors. That's the very next line above the type error. In this case, the line that gave us an error was print, and then a formatted string that says name, and in curly brackets, movie's name. So this is the line of our code that gave us the error. Then it also tells us what function that line is in. That's just the line above. It says file Users, JSLVTR, Dropbox, Teclado, Courses, Complete Python Course, Section 3, Milestone 1, app.py. It says line 40, and at the very end it says in show movie details. So this is the function that the error happened in, the show movie details function. Now, the line above is where that function was called. So this function, show movie details, was called as show movie details with movie as an argument, and the line directly above tells you in which function that function call happened. That's in the show movies function. The show movies function was called inside the menu function, and the menu function was called directly in the module, which is the file that we executed. So it tells you where your error happened, what function that was in, what function that was in, what function that was in, and so forth until you reach the file that you executed. So this is the code that raised that error. Now, we've got add movie, show movies, and then at the bottom, show movie details. I'm sure you remember this code. We wrote this for the first Milestone project. And what we've got is an add movie. We are appending to our movies list, presumably, a dictionary that has name, director, and year. In the show movies function, we're taking a movie list, we're iterating over it, and for each movie, we're showing the movie details. Inside show movie details, that takes one parameter, which is called movie, and then it's printing 3 sets of details. Now, do you notice anything weird inside show movie details? Well, I noticed something which is there, and that's that the name is now inside curly braces movie's name, whereas the other 2 print statements are movie, director, and movie year. Notice how the first one has movies there. So what's happening here is that we're trying to access this name key of a dictionary, but what we're accessing it in is the movies list. So then it tells you you cannot use this key thing to access an item inside a list. You must only do that when the thing you're accessing in is a dictionary. So if that was movie, then we could access the name key of it. Because it's movies, it's a list, we cannot access the name key of it. Movies, by the way, was defined at the top of the file as a list. That's why movies is a list. And the movie argument parameter there is a dictionary that was passed in from the show movies function. So it told us, the stack trace told us that the error happened on this print statement inside the show movie details function, and the show movie details function was called inside the show movies function, which is exactly what you can see there. The show movies function was called from within the menu function, which you don't see in this code, but it was slightly above. And the menu function was called at the file level. So how do you deal with these errors? What do you do when you encounter one of these errors? And a lot of my students encounter errors, and the first thing they do, which is a perfectly reasonable thing to do, by the way, is they go and ask in the course Q&A and they say, look, I've got this error. Help me. Now, I'm happy to help you, but if the first thing you do is go and ask me to solve your problem, which I'm happy to do because that's what I'm here for, your learning is going to be slightly impaired. So here's my recommendation for when you get an error, what to do. The first thing to do that a lot of people miss is you have to look at your code. You have to look at the line that the error happened in and see if you notice anything strange with the surrounding lines. For example, in that function there, we were using the wrong variable. I know it's a single letter of a difference, but for Python, that is a world of a difference. So look at the code carefully, and it's going to take some time for you to really start spotting those brackets or an S that's missing or not there, or, small character differences at the blink of an eye. It's going to take some time for you to get accustomed to that, but you will get there. The next thing to do is, if you can't spot anything by just looking at the code, just copy the error and the message, just the very last line, and put it into Google and see if something comes up in Stack Overflow. Normally, there's always somebody that's asked, what does this error mean? And if you put in like a name error, variable blah 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 doesn't exist into Google, you'll get somebody that's asked, I don't know what this means, and then somebody that's replied, this means your variable's not defined. So it's always helpful to put things into Google and see what comes up. Maybe there'll be something helpful there. Now, if neither of these help, you have to start taking a more methodical approach to identifying the error. This is look at the code again, but this time much more slowly and run through it as if you were a computer. That means start at the very top of your code. Think, what data am I giving the computer in this line? Then move over to the next line and think, what data am I giving it in this line? And then into the next line and so forth. Mimic what the computer is doing exactly in every function. We're going to get a lot more experts in doing this over the next few sections. But as you do this, do you notice anything that could potentially be a source of an error? But remember, the error may not be in the line, or rather the error source may not be in the line that raised the error, but rather in a different line that maybe set the variable to the wrong value or something like that. If this doesn't help, run only some parts of the code. For example, try only running the show movie details function with a dictionary as an argument. See if that works. If that works, try running the function that calls that function with some arguments. And then try running the function that calls that function with some arguments. As you incrementally run your code, eventually you'll reach a step where the error will happen. And you'll say, okay, the error must happen some point between these two function calls. And finally, if this doesn't work either, use a debugger. We're going to learn how to in the next couple of videos. PyCharm has an excellent debugger, and we're going to really be using that. And that debugger helps you step through your code and identify what variables are. It lets you sort of stop at a certain point in your code and inspect the current status of your program and so forth. It's really useful. And of course, at any point, I know this is quite tricky to go through all of these steps without despair. So at any point, ask questions in the course Q&A. We're here to help, so make use of that. Now, if you ask a question in the course Q&A, which again you should do if you're stuck, make sure that you give us all the information that you've already gathered through your search for fixing this error. That way, we don't have to then start at the top and do the same thing again. So if you tell us, I've looked at my code and I can't spot anything, then I've gone into Google and found that this error means that. And here's my code, by the way, and here's the data that I'm giving it. Now we can really quickly see, okay, you've given it this data, that all looks correct, this error means that. We can then piece the pieces of the puzzle together and find an answer much quicker. So when you ask a question in the course Q&A, give us all the information you can. And then the answer will come really quickly. We aim to have all your answers within 24 hours, but of course that's only possible if we don't have a back and forth between me and you trying to find out what the source of the problem could be. So that's it for this video. This is an intro to errors. Really, errors in Python, but also in programming as a whole. This is something you should be doing as you program in any programming language. So that's it for this video. I'll see you on the next one.